Welcome to an hour of HealthMade Radio. HealthMade is a community for natural health seekers where we educate people about common health conditions and share extensive research on the most effective natural health treatments and promote legislation that protects our health freedoms. A core concept belief is in the innate intelligence and healing power of the body, and if properly supported spiritually, emotionally, and nutritionally, it can find its way back to health. HealthMade Radio will bring information from integrative health experts throughout the world. Health is what you make it. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt, and I will be your host. Today's guest is Dr. Paul Anderson. Dr. Paul Anderson is a nationally recognized educator and clinician with more than 3 decades of experience with cancer and complex chronic illness. As head of the interventional arm of a human trial funded by the U.S. National Institute of Health, Dr. Anderson oversaw research into integrative therapies for cancer patients. Dr. Anderson was the founder of a number of clinics specializing in the care of people with cancer and chronic illness, and is now focusing his efforts training other physicians and writing. He is a co-author of Outside the Box Cancer Therapies with Dr. Mark Stengler and the anthology Success Breakthroughs with Jack Canfield. His new book, which I'm really excited about, is something that is going to help so many people in regards to what they're dealing with once they have been diagnosed. It is cancer, the journey from diagnosis to empowerment. So, Dr. Anderson, it's always a pleasure. I think this is the 3rd time that you're on my show. I think you and Dr. Judy Mikovits are about the same amount now.
Well, thank you. It's always a lot of fun, and I enjoy it. So this will be great.
Wonderful. I'm curious. Why did you? I mean, you've written so much, you've taught so much, you researched so much. Why did you feel it was so important to write this book?
Well, it's that's the whole beginning of the book was really that particular story. So that's a great place to start. So I've been working with people with cancer for going on about 30 years at this point. And when in 2018, Dr. Stengler and I, as you mentioned, published the book Outside the Box Cancer Therapies, and that's actually been, it's in, I think, 5 different languages now and all over the world. So it's been a really great book for letting people know about the science behind integrative and alternative cancer therapies. So one of the things I noticed in the interval after that came out, because I had moved in my practice to more mentoring the other doctors as opposed to directly seeing the patients, so I could affect more patients that way. And one of the things I noticed was in Outside the Box, we brought it up a little bit, the mind-body connection and that sort of thing. But of course, that book is really about treatments. And one of the things I noticed in mentoring other doctors working with cancer patients was this area of, I left it open in the book as to how people want to call it. Some people it's mind-body, and some people it's mind-body and spirit, whichever way you look at it. But that area and your ability as the patient or the loved one caregiver to become empowered in that area of your health has a whole lot to do with your outcomes and your quality of life in cancer care. And so I really saw that this was an area that both patients and doctors, could use maybe a little better top-down look at. And so this particular book really came very much from just direct interaction with lots of patients and seeing where they would get stuck in the process. So the whole genesis of the book really was to kind of take a very specific look at this connection we have, with our physical body, whether it's healthy or sick or some combination thereof, between that and our mind and the way we think and, our spirit or Shen or whatever way people want to describe that. So that's really where that came from, and it came directly from a lot of personal experience.
Yeah, and it was really fascinating to me, the gentleman that wrote your introduction. I'm Dr. Bruce Lipton, which is author of Biology of Belief, and someone that has really brought us a step closer and bridging our thoughts, to their physical impact. I mean, he's really been a leader in this field for a long, long time. I'm curious why. I mean, obviously, just having the honor of having him write the introduction. Why do you feel that he did write the introduction?
Obviously, somebody like him who's written and promoted as much, they don't have to do anything they don't want to. So I certainly couldn't make anybody write an introduction for me.
Exactly.
So Dr. Lipton and I know each other very, very little. We've met, we've talked about a lot of things we have in common, et cetera. But it's not like we're, old friends or something. So I really, I sent him the manuscript, and my thinking was, although it kind of comes from a different point of view, and you kind of see that in the introduction, what I'm really talking about is accessing, your whole self by the way that you think and by the things that you allow into your mind and your heart and all of that, as a way to improve your health. And if you look at his work with epigenetics, it's essentially the same idea. What comes in can epigenetically trigger us more in a direction of health or more in a direction of disease. And so when I sent the manuscript, obviously I just said, take a look at it, and if you would like to, normally when you write a book, you get a little, 3 or 4 sentence happy quote or something. I said, if you'd like to give me a quote, or if you feel like you want to do something else, let me know. And he actually wrote the introduction because he felt it resonated with his work.
Yeah, and I really, the reason I'm asking the question is because I see that line pretty much through your whole book, the red line, the importance of how your mind, your emotions, your attitude, how that changes the physical behavior, and then obviously it changes the outcome of your disease, and how important it is to really put an effort and not discount that component. And I know you, in your book, you have 2 stories that run parallel. One obviously that is having a good mental outset and going through the process in a healthy manner, and someone that is discounting the power of your mental, spiritual, emotional, God connection, whatever you want to call it, but that's discounting that aspect, and because of that, not able to utilize the power that Bruce Lipton and Dr. Bruce Lipton so beautifully wrote in his book, Biology of Belief.
Yeah, it's, when I was working with the publisher on the concept for the book, as you saw when you read the book, it sort of has 2 tracks. One is more of a really breaking down the process of getting connected with your inner thoughts and getting empowerment and all of that. And the other are those 2 stories about those 2 patients. And I wasn't sure, how that would play, like adding the stories of people. But the editor-in-chief went through the ideas with me and said, the core of the book is very technical and kind of how-to, and, it helps people get from point A to point B to C. So the stories actually would bring to life, what does it look like when you're trying to become, on top of things and empowered and all that, and what does it look like when you, reject that, which, of course, everybody gets to choose how they want to do things in life. But So those two patient stories, although the names are changed and all of that business, they're very real people, and the outcomes are very real and all of that. And it's, there could have been, a lot of stories on each side. So I would that they encouraged me to add those in because I think they sort of give a face to the process.
Yeah, which exactly, so people can connect with their journey, which you've beautifully written. You worked with thousands of patients dealing, working through cancer. So what is, obviously you hear the C word as a patient. You go to the doctor, they expect something is wrong and do the lab work, do the imaging, and then you get the diagnosis. What is usually the response, emotional impact that has on an individual that you've seen with all the thousands of patients that you've been exposed to and work with?
Yeah, I think, and that kind of goes back to why I really wanted to write this particular book is I started thinking about that very question of, what really is the impact of my mental state and my mind-body-spirit connection and being empowered or being a victim or, all of those sort of things that go on with folks. And just over and over, the way I describe it usually is I've never failed to see somebody who was working on the process of being empowered as a patient and getting, connected in a positive way with the mind-body connection. I've never seen them fail to have better quality of life, which, if we break down illness, the first goal is always quality of life. The better our quality of life, the less meaningful the illness is. And in many people, I can say after, all the years of watching folks, in addition to quality of life, their therapies actually seem to work better and they often have better, health or medical outcomes. And while it's a hard thing to study scientifically, there are actually publications, some of which I put into the book. I try to not make the book too publication heavy because then it makes it a little slower read. But what they've shown with people with chronic illnesses and cancer is the more empowered they are as a patient and the better their network of people who are supporting them and the more empowered they are, the better certain therapies work. Their pain management improves. A lot of other pretty critical things in medicine get better when you've got an empowered patient. So, it's not just sort of it's obviously to most people that's a common sense statement, but it's also now showing up in research around people with cancer that this does make a difference. And that matches my experience.
Right. We're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Dr. Paul Anderson. He is the author of the newly released book, Cancer, The Journey from Diagnosis to Empowerment. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Dr. Paul Anderson, and we are discussing the journey that people go through as they are diagnosed with cancer. That's the scary C word, and the journey that they go through in order to be able to be more successful in their treatment and their outcomes. So you were talking about that empowerment is really important for the patient and that the outcome is better. There's been research, and it seems like you're saying, it seems very obvious. But in your mind, what does empowerment look like from a patient's point of view?
Yeah, I think that's early in the book, I try and deal with the, what is it and what isn't it? Because a lot of people, especially as everyone would imagine and as we've talked about, the first thing when somebody gets a dangerous or deadly diagnosis, like cancer, that happens is you really go into shock. and nothing looks very good, obviously. And it's, almost nobody I've ever met wanted to be diagnosed with cancer. So it's sort of the big, bad, amorphous thing that's hanging over people's head health-wise. So one of the things that people will get sort of confused about because they're in this shock state is they feel like, well, if I'm saying, you need to, get on top of the diagnosis and be empowered and all this, if they haven't thought about that idea before, they'll say, well, what do you mean? Do you mean I'm supposed to, pretend it's not there, pretend I don't have cancer, or be in denial, or, that sort of thing? That's a common thing people imagine, that empowering thoughts are. And actually, it's the opposite of that. Now, everybody, one of the things I do in the book to help people kind of navigate this process is we don't wake up empowered around a chronic illness or cancer. Most people are not there. It's a process we work on. So what I try and do is lay out that it's very normal and natural to be in shock, and then to have the kind of the normal stages of grief occur, whether it's anger or denial or bargaining, or most people go through most of those all at the same time. Those are normal parts of the process, but the important thing is that empowerment lies as you move through that process. And so when you're an empowered patient, you have a realistic relationship with the disease, but you don't give the disease more power than it has. And you also don't, engage in denial, which is pretending it has less power than it has. So you have as realistic as possible a relationship with it. And part of that is processing your own fears and your own trepidation around having the disease, because the unknown makes you unempowered. The holding on to fear makes you unempowered, just like any other thing in life. So being empowered is actually having a very realistic relationship with the disease, but also not having the disease have more power or more mystery than it really does. And that is a process for people to go through.
So it's almost like, because we envision power being that, I'm strong, I'm staying positive, I can handle this. So from what I'm hearing, being empowered more, or kind of taking control of the situation, is to allowing yourself to move through the process of, there are different stages, obviously, when you're diagnosed, of anger, of grief, of sadness, depression, and being present in that process instead of fighting the process and then finding healing in that journey.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's and as you and everybody who would think about it understand, this is not a comfortable process to go through, at least in the beginning, because whether we have cancer or not, all of us have things in our life that maybe we haven't dealt with, or there are fears that we've covered up with other either ignoring them or other behaviors or whatever. And so what happens when you have a real extreme diagnosis like cancer is, if you want to get to this place of being empowered, you also have to sift through these these other areas that need work in your life. And frankly, a lot of people who decide not to do this sort of work, that's a big part of why they decide not to, whether it's conscious or not. They'll decide, this is just too much work. I mean, I'm going to have to deal with some of my own internal, negativity, or some people call them their internal demons or whatever. I'm going to have to lay those bare and expose them, and find my way to the other side. So it does take a bit of work. But the other thing, as you notice with the book, which is different from some of the other things I've written, I try to keep it really to the point and make it an easy read, so anybody can get through that book in a very short amount of time. And the point of that really is that there is a typical pathway people go through with some, unique individualness for each of us, and everybody can do it. It's a very doable thing. But the first thing is to realize you're gonna face some things that maybe you haven't had to face because you didn't have a cancer diagnosis before. So that's a lot of it. It's realizing, okay, this is a little uncomfortable. I got to go through some stuff, but if the payoff is better quality of life, better health, et cetera, that's worth it.
And I've had, as you have, I had many patients that they feel cancer was one of the biggest blessings that they've ever had in their life, because it put them in a place where they were forced to look at things that they never wanted to look at or never did look at, and because of that, they were able to kind of find a new level of joy in life. Now, when they moved through, like for instance, I had a patient with colon cancer, and when she was diagnosed, she was thinking, they found where I stuff all my emotions, or my trash bin, and so now when now it's visible, now she had to deal with it, and now she feels this was many years ago, and she lives a happy life and enjoying life now. So it's fascinating how something so horrendous can become a life. Obviously it's life changing, but life changing to the better.
Yeah, and as you say, we hear this all the time, and most people. You wouldn't, looking forward, wouldn't choose cancer as a vehicle to, to open up these things in their lives. But I've had many patients, just like you say, bring that up. That, it was as far as kind of waking me up as a human and getting me in touch with the things I need to work on and deal with. It's an extreme catalyst, extremely good catalyst. And we hear this from patients, obviously, who have other, kind of high criticality things, heart problems, and, many other, major accidents. Sometimes it takes that for us humans to shake us out of our comfort zone and make us grow. Yeah.
Exactly. We're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Dr. Paul Anderson. He is the co-author of Outside the Box Cancer Therapies, which I have here at my center and I sell to my patients because it is such a valuable book. And now the next book that I'm going to have for my patients here at the center is Cancer, The Journey from Diagnosis to Empowerment. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Dr. Paul Anderson. He is somebody that I highly value his expertise in, and I've gone to many conferences that he's led. He's a nationally, if not internationally, recognized educator and clinician. So, Dr. Anderson, we're talking about a journey and how it is important to move through that journey. And in your book, you're talking about the 6 OKs on a patient's journey. And what are those 6 OKs, and why are they okay?
That's a great place to start. In going back to when once we talked about why I wrote the book, and that as a sort of the impetus, then you kind of start out and you come up with these ideas that are I guess things that you're going to build build your concepts around. And the thing that I wanted to make sure people did, because we talked about sort of 2 different stories of people who some people take that and work through and become empowered, and some people don't, and they become disempowered. But one of the things that I guess, happen with people is well-meaning people will often get not really, maybe depressed, but they'll feel overwhelmed because, gosh, they've got a diagnosis of cancer, which is overwhelming in and of itself. And then they're not really sure, how to navigate trying to work through their issues and become empowered. And one of the big stumbling blocks turns out to be they don't realize that it's normal to go through certain things. So every human goes through these things. So one of the early core things that I started to write out is what do people often not realize is normal? And so I came up with the OK list, as you mentioned, the 6 OKs. So the first one is it's okay that this is a process. And, it sounds like, well, that's sort of obvious. But a lot of people think, well, empowerment seems like I could just take a couple of steps and just be there. And it's a process, but everybody's process is unique to them because we all have different experiences and, different strengths, different hang-ups, all of that. The next okay is that it's okay that you go at your own pace. It's not a race. You're not competing with other people. And while there might be a process that's kind of common to humanity, you need your own speed to uncover things and work through them and all of that. The next one is it's okay to take longer in one area than another. So throughout the book, I go through, different stepping stones along the way that most of us have to deal with when we get these, types of diagnoses. And the thing that people sometimes don't realize is they may be really great. And, for example, denial may not be a problem for them. So they kind of move through that one pretty quickly, but maybe anger is more of a problem for them. And what they need to realize is that that's normal and okay. And yet the next person may have no problem with the anger part, but, the denial might be bigger and vice versa. So, the point of, it's okay that you might take longer in one area than another is we all process differently, but also if my personal issue is more around, either anger or maybe family relationships or something, I'm just going to take longer there than you might. It's okay to go back and relive a stage. So often as we process, and anybody who's, lost a loved one, had a loved one die or some tragedy, usually finds this out, that as you process your grief, you may think that you've kind of, got a leg up on it and you're doing pretty good. And then, something will happen and you kind of have to circle back and realize you still have some, grief in a certain area. Well, in a sense, a diagnosis of cancer and trying to get towards empowerment, you're grieving, the loss of the health that you believed you had. So, recycling is a common thing. The big one is, which all chronic illness people, patients have to come to terms with, is that it's okay to have bad days. I mean, healthy people have bad days too, but when you have cancer, sometimes you wake up and it's like, oh boy, I thought I was really more on top of having the diagnosis and dealing with my, whatever you're doing for treatment and all of that. Today's just not going very well. And it's okay. It doesn't mean that, you're backsliding. It doesn't mean anything bad. And the final of the okays was, it's okay to want to give up. Because, we all hit moments in life where it's like, man, it'd be easier just to not do this, and one of the impediments to people moving through empowerment, et cetera, that I've seen has been not being realistic, that this is it's a doable process, but it takes a little bit of mental focus and intensity to, kind of move through and deal with your own stuff. And so there's just days where they'll be hard, and there's days where, you just need to hit the pause button and take a break because you feel like, well, I'd just rather not do this. Usually internally, we don't really mean that. What we really mean is we just need a little break to recoup and recharge. So those are the okays.
Yeah, and it's really important, and I really love that in your book, to kind of recognize that it's okay to be weak. I mean, it's okay to, like you're saying, it's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to want to give up. It's okay to, sometimes feel like this, I can't do this anymore, and just kind of and move through those emotions and move through those feelings, and instead of just kind of pretending that you are strong and standing up while internally you are feeling those feelings, but you're projecting the face of that I'm strong and I can move through this, and when that in reality is not what's going on. So I really enjoy that in your book a lot. Also, I'm curious. So you're giving this. It's almost kind of like it is a formal in a way, meaning that there's a process that people tend to go through. Is there a certain kind of uniqueness in this process that people will go through steps differently, or other steps that they will move through that other people don't? I mean, is there a certain kind of uniqueness to this process also that you've seen?
Definitely. And that was a balance I tried to strike as I was writing, is you want the path to be clear enough, so I describe the path and the normal steps people go through in the order, et cetera, so that anybody can, see, oh, okay, here's where I am and here's where I'm headed, and, this is possible and doable. But you also have to be realistic and know that, we as humans are all very unique and individual. And while there might be a general path and direction we take, mine might meander in a different direction than the next person's. And again, that's okay. And so, the other thing that makes it very unique to people is some people, most people, but I would say some people especially, maybe because of other events in their life before they get a diagnosis of cancer, will have already really done a lot of work in looking at, maybe their internal insecurities and their fears, or maybe done a lot of work in seeing that, gee, I don't deal with my fears or my worries. I stuff them inside, and maybe they've already worked on, that sort of thing. Well, they're, of course, they're going to be in a different place when it comes to dealing with that part, the internal sort of struggle. But by the same token, maybe that same person hasn't dealt with, some toxic external relationships, which is a, big thing I bring up, that, the people around us can either be a good medicine or a poison, in the way that they speak into our brains and our lives and everything. And one person may have really be on top of that, but not so much on top of their internal, fears or stuffing things in or whatever. And the next person, could be the opposite. So it's predictable what's going to happen, but how much time and effort you take in each space is very individual.
Yeah, well, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Dr. Paul Anderson. He is, he's written three extremely valuable books. But the last one is Cancer, the Journey from Diagnosis to Empowerment. It is pretty much a must-have for anyone that is dealing with the diagnosis or know of someone dealing with the diagnosis, to really understand what's going on and the steps, and to appropriately be there for that individual to support them in the right kind of way, because there's many ways that and that you can support them, that is not the correct way. So we'll be right back. Welcome back to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Dr. Paul Anderson. He's the author of the new book, newly released, Cancer, The Journey from Diagnosis to Empowerment. You were talking a little bit about people in someone's lives. I mean, you have a cancer patient and they're going through their emotional journey. But then you also have the people around them that is the support system. So what kind of directions should they have? I mean, how should they behave around this individual? What is appropriate? What is not appropriate? So that this person can go through this journey in the most gentle and beneficial way.
Yeah, I think that that's a very critical point that, some people, just like everything we talked about, some people are really pretty on top of, and some people don't realize the power of the other people in our lives. And so there's a couple of things. One is when I was writing the book, the tone that I took is inclusive, that these same processes and steps and the OKs and all of that, those same things apply whether you are the cancer patient or you're a loved one, caregiver, family member, etc. And the reason I say that and wrote the book in that way is, let's say you don't have cancer, but your spouse does, or your brother or sister or friend, loved one, someone you're close to. You will grieve and process the diagnosis of your friend or loved one in the same way that they are, but you're going to do it through your own, personal experience and background. So, yes, you don't have cancer yourself, but your process is going to be very similar. So one of the things I think that's important, and this, sometimes for obvious and not so obvious reasons, this catches people off guard. They may have a very supportive friend or loved one or spouse under normal circumstances, but they get a diagnosis of cancer, and suddenly that friend or loved one or spouse becomes distant or not supportive or seemingly, even antagonistic. And something that, we all see sometimes and I try to bring out in the book is what you don't know about maybe your loved one or your spouse or somebody is they may have some very deep internal triggers around cancer that have never come out before because you've just now been diagnosed and you weren't diagnosed before. So I've seen caregivers and spouses, for example, go from being extremely supportive to suddenly, not knowing how to be supportive or how to deal with their loved one. And it really wasn't about the loved one with cancer. It was about something in their own process and makeup. For example, some people have had the experience of being a child and then their parent was diagnosed or died from cancer. And that gets buried way deep down. And then if your spouse then gets diagnosed with cancer, your body and your mind react without you knowing it consciously that, oh no, this is going to be just like when my dad died, or it's going to be just like when my cousin, passed away. You're not even thinking that often. And so then you suddenly, a wall gets built up. So I think that what I try and bring out in the book is there's two kinds of seemingly negative experiences with friends and loved ones that can be dealt with. The majority, thankfully, are just people dealing with their own stuff, and the more they do that, then the more supportive they can be to you. And so they can use the same concepts in the book to move through these things. The minority are what I talk about in the chapter where I talk about toxic influences and toxic people. And thankfully, a lot of times these are maybe not your spouse or your close friends, but they may be in your circle. And they're not they're not a good influence in your life, and you need to minimize or distance yourself from those sort of folks. If it's somebody who's, critical to your life or your main caregiver, your spouse, somebody like that, there are ways that you can, work with, say, counselors, et cetera, to help the other person move through their stuff and become supportive. And it's very rare that family members, who are close or caregivers have to be, you have to distance yourself from them because they're toxic. Usually it's just that they're dealing with their own troubles and, they can do that. But I have had a lot of patients where, they just had to really limit exposure to certain friends who meant well, but they were very negative and they were speaking a lot of, toxic, negative influence into their life. So it's, but it turns out, that it's about what's inside that person who's being negative. It's not about you, the cancer patient, and that person can either, deal with it or you can have less to do with them.
And one thing, I couldn't agree more. I mean, one of the things that I'm also curious about before we kind of end the show, you have the cancer patients, they're undergoing treatment, and now it's time then to evaluate how effective this treatment is. So they're doing imaging, they're doing blood labs, and there's this certain kind of anxiety that comes, what is it going to show, and then also there's a certain kind of reaction depending on what is showing, so let's say they're doing treatment and it's failing, or it is extremely successful. Now what? So what would be kind of a good mental place for an individual, that's dealing with cancer, or family members that have a loved one dealing with cancer, to be at, in preparation for this moment when they're anticipating for the test and then they're getting the results, and how to respond to that?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing, and of course this is the most one of the most common things we see, is test result anxiety. And it's, that's, first thing is that's very normal. And, every person with anything, but especially with cancer, goes through, test anxiety. So I think that the first thing for both the patient and the caregivers, loved ones, family members, is to realize that it's normal to be anxious when you get your next PET scan or your next tumor markers, or whatever it is you're doing. And the next thing, which is the hardest thing in the world, and I've talked to many cancer patients about this, is to actually get to the point where whatever way the test results come out is just one piece of a very big puzzle that involves you and your health. And so come out very good, it's certainly normal to be happy about that. Everybody rejoices when that happens. But that's still just one piece of the puzzle, and we have to, continue to be, whatever it is that's going on, be preventive or treating or whatever. If the results come out and they're not what you wanted, maybe there's been some progression, or the PET scan looks a little bit worse, or the markers go higher, and this is the harder time, it's very difficult to say, okay, that's real, but it's a piece of my puzzle. It's not the entire part of what predicts my health. And so and I would say of everything with the cancer patient and their closest loved ones, outcomes of tests are probably the hardest thing to be objective about as a patient or loved one, because you sort of put all the, you put all your effort behind this being a good result and outcome. But the other side of it really is, you can have your PET scan get, worse, or the markers go higher, et cetera. And it may indeed mean that there's, more cancer activity and we need to do more or do something different, et cetera. But that doesn't mean that you have to give that negative result or negative report all of your power and a lot of people do that. So part of being empowered is being empowered regardless whether the news is positive or negative. And that's really where the rubber meets the road as far as, the more difficult part of what you're doing.
Yeah, and it's even in cancer. I mean, cancer therapies. You have this, the attitude that every failure is a step closer to success. I mean, you're eliminating the possibilities, and that way you kind of get closer to where you want to go. So it's even a bad result is it's a result that's very usable and is very needed, for you to reach your goal.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, as a patient, that's really hard to see that, well, gee, we did this for 8 weeks and we know that doesn't work now, so we have to do something different. But in a sense, that's one of those bright sides or, maybe more positive than you believe things that it can be very helpful for the practitioner to also remind the person of. But, what I find with patients is the more empowered patients they'll take a pause, they'll realize, okay, this is negative, but it's not all negative, and it's just a piece of, this big puzzle, and what do we do next? Where do we go? Yeah.
Well, Dr. Anderson, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show, and I'm always so grateful for the information that you bring out to people to empower them and to help them through very dire situations. And this is a wonderful book, Cancer: The Journey from Diagnosis to Empowerment. I mean, it's exactly the same reason why I started my additional podcast that I'm doing, Integrative Cancer Solutions with Dr. Karlfeldt, so that people that have been diagnosed can listen to other real people that have gone through the journey and what they dealt with and what they did to have a better outcome. So, Dr. Anderson, thank you so much for being on my show and for everything that you do.
Thank you for having me.
That is it for today. You're listening to Health Made Radio. Remember, check us out at healthmade.co. Health is what you make it. 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 What you make